Hello, my name is Hannah Warren, and I am here to provide a brief presentation regarding my final project visualization poster for IST 719, Professor Gary Crudis, and I'm in the online session of this course. So, as a refresher, for those of you who haven't heard my other presentations, I had 3 data sets that I was going to use for my final project and other presentations that went along with it. The first being a directory of farmers markets from across the nation. The second being an access database that dealt with access to food and nutritious food across the U.S. And a third dealing with insecurity. There's a definition that I have for food security on my poster, and it's basically if people in a household have some sort of question whether they'll have enough to eat for the week. That is, by definition, food insecurity. So I took these 2 data sets and I played with them. I ended up playing with them quite a bit in Tableau. That's what most of these map visualizations are from. I did Tableau for my advanced topic presentation, and I ended up using it quite extensively for my final, so that worked out really well. So I started up here in the upper left with just some basic exploration of the data. I have some line graphs or bar plots dealing with the number of markets in different states across the U.S. That's what this first map visualization also deals with. And the top 10 and the bottom 10, just so you could sort of get an idea. Of course, California and New York are at the top, and states like Alaska, Delaware, South Dakota are at the bottom for warm weather markets, and I visualize them by county in this map visualization. Probably a little bit of a reflection of population. You'll notice that Philadelphia, New York, and DC have the highest concentrations of markets. Some areas in California as well. Those are also large population centers, so it makes sense. And then I went further with the other part of this data set. They had a separate database dealing with farmers market locations during the winter months, which I thought was really interesting to see how the distribution of farmers markets sort of changed throughout the year. You can imagine there's a growing season for every fruit and vegetable that someone will be bringing to one of these markets, so let's take a look at the distribution when it gets colder. And it's to be expected there are fewer. Still, the major population centers still have a pretty good number, and it was interesting to see a couple of towns in New Mexico and Arizona sort of pop up like they hadn't before. So, an interesting exploration of the data, pretty basic, however. California and New York still in the lead for farmers market locations in the winter months. And so, just an interesting sort of overview. And at those farmers markets, I wanted to do just a quick examination of what was available there. I generally view staples like eggs, meat, and of course fruits and vegetables, which would be widely available at most markets nationwide. And just did a quick examination of those with some pie charts. So eggs and fruits, so the key is here. Yes would be, yes, we do have these particular items that we sell at our farmer's market. Vegetables and fruits are obviously pretty prevalent. So are eggs, which I was a little bit surprised about. But it does make sense that a lot of farmers do raise chickens and hens. So that follows, sort of. And meat was less prevalent, about a third each way, which I think is very interesting. I know there are a few meat distributors that show up at the regional market here in Syracuse, so I was curious about that. And those distributions did change seasonally. I was very surprised, again with the eggs, that there were that many hens still laying in the cold months. I guess I don't know very much about farm animals, but somehow it didn't really seem to add up. There are definitely fruits and lots of vegetables at these markets over the winter, and meat seems to be more prevalent of the markets that stay open for the cold months. So, also interesting take. And then I got sort of into the access and insecurity portion of my visualization work. It's been talked about a lot during the election, but the availability of assistance for food programs is definitely a hot debate topic. And so I wanted to do a brief examination of the prevalence of those benefits in different states. Generally, SNAP and WIC are about half and half during the warm months at warm weather farmers markets. I'm sorry, this is winter. At winter farmers markets, they're half and half, but then in the warm weather, the no portion goes up quite a bit. So that tells me that farmers markets are at least, they're looked upon as a staple sometimes for some people who need the additional help during the winter. So I found that very interesting. And if you look here, I did another breakdown by state. I made my poster very large. One of the things that I was struggling with was making sure that the text was readable. I tried to keep the smallest to about 8 points, which is still pretty small for most people, but there was just so much that I wanted to cover, which might be sort of my downfall in the end, but here is the brief examination of those benefits percentages across different states, starting with, some of them seem to make sense to me. Like New York has a pretty hefty number of participants and people in that program. But it's also very interesting to me that there are a lot of southern states, like Mississippi seems to lead the whole lot of them. Texas is a big one. New Mexico in the west and Oregon in the west. Definitely DC is up there. And West Virginia being down south. Historically, or at least in my mind, these are the states that seem to have the most resistance to this kind of programming. So I found that to be very interesting. Alabama is pretty much right there with Mississippi. So definitely a point of consideration for someone who is looking for a state that's receptive to giving out some assistance when necessary. And that might have some bearing on the acceptance of those particular benefits at the farmers markets that are in the area. I did write a little blurb on the bottom of my my visualization, and then this is kind of the meat of it. This is definitely the most time consuming as well. The actual creation of the visualization is pretty speedy with Tableau, but I did do some tweaks to sort of highlight different regions, and that was kind of a lot of manual change. But basically, it centers around a map visualization with the counties being the fill areas of percentages of people in that population who have low access to food. And so the darker the shading, the higher the percentage. And there are definitely a lot of towns in the Midwest and the West, or a lot of counties in the Midwest and the West, who have 100% low access to food, which I found kind of shocking when you think about the modern era and the age that we're in. But there aren't a lot of people in these states, and the counties are rather large and spread out, so it makes sense that people won't have a grocery very close by them. They'd have to get in the car and drive, or hopefully take a form of public transportation if available to get to these places where they can buy groceries, which is a very important point of consideration, I think. There are a few counties here in Virginia, that's Virginia, and a couple of other counties in the South where that same thing is a problem. And then I tried to go and examine county by county with a superimposed number signifying very low food security on top of the low access. So a county that has a darkly shaded color, darkly shaded green, and a high number superimposed over it is probably in pretty bad shape when it comes to access to food and security of people who are purchasing food in that county. So counties like this one right here in, let's see, what is that? What state? Nebraska, perhaps? And that's an important point that I wanted to cover as far as limitations of my visualization. I tried really hard to have as many details as possible without making it too overpowering. I'm looking at it now, and it does look like the numbers are a little bit small and difficult to read. And so I was having trouble filtering it so that only the ones that were particularly impactful where it would show up. But when I did that in Tableau, all of the other counties, all of the shading in the counties that didn't have that significant food security value also disappeared. So it was kind of a delicate balance trying to get as much information on the page, but have it be as readable as possible. And with that, there was a trade-off that there were no state abbreviations that could go along with it. So if you don't have a very good handle on U.S. geography, you might end up having to look it up in a different location, which is a downside, I think. But like I said, you can sort of examine these counties and see roughly the areas that are having the most difficulty, especially if they have a dark shading and a high number superimposed. A few here are really in kind of dire straits when it comes to both of those variables. And then we can examine the same information in different regions. Definitely Texas has some work to do, probably because those areas are so sparsely populated. But a major point to sort of be aware of as it comes to Texas and its access to food. Nevada having a few issues, Arizona, New Mexico, and a few others. So I found that was really interesting. I did not opt to visualize food deserts, which are a combination of low income and low populations with low access, because the USDA actually does a really great job with that already. They have a flash visualization on the USDA website that does something a bit like that. But I wanted to leave the income out of the equation for now and just sort of examine those socioeconomic or social and location-based factors that can really impact people. And so that is my final visualization for this course. If you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. And thank you for your time and your attention.